Hey everybody, it is time for another series preview, and we have made it to our final division, the North Division, which starts their playoffs on Wednesday night. First up, we are going to be looking at the Edmonton Oilers, the 2 seed against the 3 seed Winnipeg Jets up in the north. Their series will begin on Wednesday and is sure to be, hopefully, a really good one between these Canadian rivals. So, before we get into it, I just ask you please subscribe and hit that thumbs up if you haven't. It helps the channel so much and is greatly appreciated. But let's take a look here. The Edmonton Oilers against the Winnipeg Jets. Edmonton went 35-19-2 on the season, good enough for 72 points and a second-place finish in the North Division. They played extremely well against Winnipeg this year, going 7-2-0 versus the Jets, and really dominating that season series in the regular season. Edmonton's a very high-scoring team, which you would expect given the likes of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, who were incredible offensive producers this year, including McDavid with over 100 points in just an unreal season that is almost for sure going to grab him the MVP this year. 3.27 goals for per game, which was 7th best in the NHL. But they also were very solid defensively, and that, might be something that catches a few people off guard given how the Oilers have been over their recent history. They actually did a fairly good job of keeping the puck out of their own net this year, giving up just 2.75 goals against per game, which is tied for 11th best in the NHL. So not quite top 10 defense, but top half of the league, which is good for the Oilers. Their power play is absolutely lethal. The Winnipeg Jets cannot take penalties this series if they're going to have any chance to win, because the Oilers will absolutely bury them if they get power play opportunities. 27.6% on the power play this year, which is first in the NHL. They have the best power play in the league in the regular season. And with McDavid, with Draisaitl, with Tyson Barrie manning the point, that is not unexpected. Power play has been a huge boost and a huge advantage for the Oilers this season. They're also pretty good on the penalty kill. 82.5% on the PK this year, which was 9th best in the NHL. So they are top 10 in both areas of special teams, power play and PK. You're not going to want to get into a special teams battle with the Edmonton Oilers. They will beat you if you do that. Switching things over now to the Winnipeg Jets. They went 30-23-3 on the season, good enough for 63 points and a third-place finish in the North Division. However, they really struggled with the Oilers, at least in the regular season. Now, there's no guarantee that carries over into the playoffs, but that's certainly going to be an advantage Oilers here looking at the regular season series, as Winnipeg just went 2-7-0 against Edmonton this year and really struggled to stop McDavid and Draisaitl in the offense for the Oilers. And that season series really favored Edmonton and Edmonton's top players in particular. Winnipeg is a decent offensive team, not top 10, but certainly top half of the league. 3.04 goals for per game. That's 12th in the NHL. So not a bad year scoring-wise for the Jets. And they actually had a pretty good year defensively, despite, their defense core on paper not exactly looking like a defense core that would take you deep into the playoffs. They only gave up 2.71 goals against per game, which is 10th best in the NHL. So they did pretty well at keeping the puck out of their net this season. And while Connor Hellebuyck obviously won the Vezina Trophy last year, he has had kind of an up and down year this year. His numbers are still pretty good. Certainly not a bad year for Hellebuyck, but he did start to struggle a little bit down the stretch. and that is something to watch heading into this series. Now, Winnipeg's power play is pretty darn good too. We talk about Edmonton having the best power play in the league, but Winnipeg's operates at 23%, and they have the 7th best power play in the league. So they can score on the man advantage as well. And again, you don't want to be taking penalties in a series like this because both of these teams have power plays that can make you pay. Their penalty kill is decent. It's not great. It's not top 10. It's 13th best in the NHL at 80.5% on the PK. Again, you don't really want to test it. A middle-of-the-road penalty kill against the best power play in the league. You don't want to start playing that game if you're the Winnipeg Jets. So I think the best thing for them would be try and stay out of the box as much as they can, and not even have to deal with that Oilers power play. Overall, as you can see, the Oilers have the advantage offensively, and that is certainly not a surprise given the firepower that Edmonton has and two of the top scorers in the NHL with Draisaitl and McDavid. However, the questions with Edmonton continue about their playoff performances. I mean, obviously, they went into the qualifying round a heavy favorite last year, and they ended up getting beaten by the 12-seed Chicago Blackhawks. So there's not a great recent playoff history for the Oilers. Winnipeg didn't do spectacular in the postseason last year either, to say the least. They ended up losing to Calgary in their qualifying round as well. So both of these teams, kind of disappointing with how last year ended. It's going to be interesting to see how they look in the playoffs this year. Edmonton definitely has the advantage offensively. I think Winnipeg might have a slight advantage defensively. Special teams, definitely the Edmonton Oilers have the advantage as far as special teams go. Both power play and penalty kill. Oilers have the advantage there. So this series is going to have to be 5-on-5 if the Winnipeg Jets are going to have a chance to take this one. Some storylines going in that I think are going to really play a big role in what happens here is the fact that the goaltending actually for both teams. I'm going to talk about Connor Hellebuyck first because when you look at his overall numbers this season, they're not quite as good as they were last season when he won the Vezina, but they're still pretty darn good. However, my issue with Hellebuyck is that down the stretch, his last 10 starts or so, he was very inconsistent. He kind of alternated good start and bad start down the stretch. He would play really well one night, then he'd come out in the next game and get lit up. Then he'd come out and have a good bounce back game, but then the game after that, he'd give up 4 goals again. And, it was very inconsistent down the stretch for Hellebuyck, and that is not going to win in the playoffs. It just isn't. If you're going to pull off an upset against a higher seeded team, you need good goaltending all the time. And I want to see which Connor Hellebuyck shows up for the Winnipeg Jets. Is it going to be the Vezina Trophy Connor Hellebuyck, or is it going to be the inconsistent last month of the season Connor Hellebuyck? Because that could be the single thing that decides this series. Mike Smith for the Oilers is another one that to me is kind of a question mark. I mean, Smith had a great year this year. There is no doubt about it. But Mike Smith, I don't really fully trust him in the postseason. Obviously, way back in 2012, he went on a very nice run with the Arizona Coyotes, but that was, a long time ago now. That was almost a decade ago now. And, his recent playoff performances have not been great. You look at when he was in Calgary in 2019, and they got absolutely hammered by the Avalanche and lost in 5 games in the first round, even though they were the 1 seed and the Avs were the wild card team. And then you look at what happened last year between him and Koskinen, and both goaltenders ended up playing last season in the qualifying round, and they both got absolutely chewed up and spit out by Chicago's offense. So I think goaltending is going to be interesting to see for both of these teams and see which team is able to get the advantage there. Another thing that I'm looking at for sure is the Edmonton Oilers' depth. Obviously, we know about McDavid and Draisaitl. We know about the high-end scoring that they have when their top players are on the ice, when their power play is on the ice. But depth continues to kind of be a question mark here with the Oilers. And they're going to need contributions from people not named McDavid and Draisaitl. Maybe not as much in the first round, but if they're going to go deep into the playoffs, they certainly are. Because as we saw last year, McDavid and Draisaitl can't do it all themselves. And if you find some way to shut them down, or not, you'll never completely shut them down, but if you find some way to limit them, you could be in trouble, or the Oilers could be in big, big trouble if they don't have anyone else that can step up. And finally, Winnipeg. Winnipeg kind of struggled down the stretch. They didn't have a great last month of the season, so I wonder if that's going to carry over here into the playoffs, or if the Jets have been able to hit the reset button and look at this as a fresh start in a way to just kind of to reset things and move on with a clean slate and start from scratch here in the postseason. If they're able to do that, they definitely have a shot in this series. Now, I think this is going to be a really interesting series. I might be a little too down on Winnipeg because of the way that they ended their season. In my predictions, I took the Oilers in 5 games here. I think Winnipeg can certainly put up a better fight than that, but they are going to need Connor Hellebuyck to be at his best. They are going to need to play consistent, good hockey, which was a bit of a struggle for them in the last month, but they certainly are capable of winning this series and putting up a good fight against Edmonton. I also have serious question marks about the Oilers, including the fact that I just don't really trust them given what happened last year, but I do think Edmonton is a better team this season, and I do have them winning this series. So with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon, merchandise store, donation link, and channel memberships are in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.